The psychology of people who notice what others miss. You know that one person who notices things nobody else seems to see? The one who picks up on a strange tone in someone's voice. The one who notices tension in a room before anyone says a word. The one who somehow knows something is wrong long before it becomes obvious. Most people call them overthinkers, too sensitive, paranoid, or someone who reads too much into everything. But what if that's not what's happening at all? What if noticing what others miss isn't a flaw, but a psychological pattern? Because people who notice things most people overlook often share a very different way of processing the world. And today we'll explore 5 hidden psychological traits that make them see what others don't. One of them might explain you better than you expect. Most people move through life on autopilot. Their brains automatically ignore thousands of tiny details every day. But some people don't filter information the same way. They notice facial expressions that change for a split second, a pause before someone answers, a shift in energy, a subtle inconsistency in a story. Things others dismiss as meaningless. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as heightened awareness, not because these people are smarter than everyone else, but because their attention naturally lands on details that others overlook. To them, the details are the story, and that's why they often sense something is wrong long before anyone else notices. People who notice what others miss are often excellent pattern detectors. Their brains constantly compare the present moment to thousands of previous experiences. The conversation feels slightly different. Someone's behavior changes by 2%. A routine suddenly shifts. Most people ignore it. They don't. Their minds automatically ask, why is this different? And sometimes they can't even explain what they're noticing. They just know something feels off. This is why many of them develop strong intuition, not because they possess some mysterious gift, but because their brains are quietly connecting patterns beneath conscious awareness. What looks like intuition is often observation accumulated over years. For many people, this awareness didn't appear by accident. It was learned. Some grew up in environments where paying attention was necessary. Maybe emotions were unpredictable. Maybe conflict appeared without warning. Maybe they learned early that noticing subtle changes helped them stay safe. Over time, the brain becomes trained to scan constantly, to watch, to analyze, to anticipate. This doesn't mean something was wrong with them. It means their minds adapted. Their awareness became a survival skill. And years later, they still notice things most people miss. One of the most fascinating traits of highly observant people is that they often notice contradictions. Someone says they're fine, but their posture says otherwise. Someone smiles, but their eyes don't. Someone claims they're confident, but their behavior reveals uncertainty. Most people listen to words. Highly observant people pay attention to everything else. That's why they sometimes seem uncannily accurate when reading people. They're not mind readers. They're simply noticing signals that most people never register. But there is a downside. When you notice more, you carry more. You see tensions others miss. You detect problems before they happen. You notice emotional shifts. You recognize patterns. And sometimes your mind struggles to stop processing. This is why highly observant people often battle overthinking. Not because they imagine things, but because they have more information to process. Their awareness becomes both a gift and a responsibility. The challenge is learning when to trust what you notice and when to let go. People who notice what others miss usually fall into one of 5 common psychological types. The first is the detail observer. These are the people who notice tiny things almost instantly. A new haircut, a missing ring, a different tone of voice, a slight change in someone's daily routine. Most people barely register these details, but the detail observer does. And interestingly, this isn't always about intelligence. It's often about attention. Their brain naturally treats small details as important information. That's why they're usually the first to notice when someone is struggling emotionally. The problem is that they often notice changes in others while ignoring changes in themselves. They're excellent observers, but not always excellent caretakers of their own emotional state. The second type is the pattern detector. This person doesn't just notice details, they connect them. One event means nothing. 2 events might be coincidence. 3 events create a pattern. Pattern detectors constantly ask, what does this mean? They notice recurring behaviors, repeated mistakes, cycles in relationships, families, workplaces, and friendships. Many successful strategists, analysts, entrepreneurs, and creators fall into this category. They see connections long before everyone else catches up. The downside is that sometimes they see patterns even when there aren't any. And that's where overthinking begins. Their greatest strength and greatest weakness often come from the same place. The third type is the room reader. You know those people who walk into a room and instantly know something feels off? That's them. Nobody has said anything. Nobody has explained anything. But they can feel tension, discomfort, distance, and conflict. This happens because they're highly tuned to social and emotional signals. Body language, eye contact, facial expressions, physical positioning, micro reactions. Most people hear words. The room reader hears the emotional atmosphere behind the words. Because of that, they often become the unofficial emotional radar of their social circles. The fourth type is the human lie detector. No, they don't magically know when people are lying, but they often notice inconsistencies. Words don't match actions. Confidence doesn't match behavior. Promises don't match effort. They pay attention to what people do, not just what people say. That's why they often feel uncomfortable around manipulation. Their minds naturally look for alignment when something doesn't fit. They notice the challenge is that they sometimes become cynical. After spotting enough contradictions, it's easy to start expecting them everywhere. And that's a trap many highly observant people eventually face. The final type is the silent analyst, perhaps the most misunderstood type of all. These are the people who appear quiet, reserved, or even detached. But internally, their minds never stop observing, never stop connecting information, never stop analyzing. People often assume they're disengaged. The reality is usually the opposite. They're paying attention to everything. They're simply processing before speaking. And because they spend so much time observing, when they finally do speak, people often listen, because what they say tends to be surprisingly accurate. Many silent analysts spend years feeling different, not realizing there are countless others exactly like them. If you've recognized yourself in one or more of these types, you may have spent years wondering whether you think too much. Maybe you've been told you're too sensitive, too serious, too aware. Maybe people have rolled their eyes when you pointed something out, only to realize later that you were right. And after enough experiences like that, many highly observant people learn something dangerous. They learn to doubt themselves. They stop speaking up. They ignore their instincts. They convince themselves they're imagining things. But here's the truth. People who notice what others miss are often forced to live with a strange contradiction. They see things clearly, but they are constantly told they don't. They sense changes before others do, but they're accused of overreacting. They recognize patterns, but they're told they're overthinking, and over time, that can make a person question their own reality. But psychology suggests something important. Observation is not the same thing as anxiety. Awareness is not the same thing as paranoia. Sensitivity is not the same thing as weakness. In many cases, what people call overthinking is actually a mind that has learned to pay attention. A mind that notices details, patterns, contradictions, and human behavior. And while that awareness can sometimes become exhausting, it can also become one of your greatest strengths. Because highly observant people often avoid problems others walk straight into. They recognize unhealthy relationships earlier. They notice dishonesty sooner. They detect emotional shifts faster. They understand people more deeply. And they often make sense of situations long before the full picture appears. The goal isn't to stop noticing. The goal is to trust what you notice without becoming trapped by it. To observe without obsessing. To stay aware without becoming overwhelmed. To use your awareness as a tool, not a prison. Because awareness becomes wisdom only when it is balanced by peace. The people who notice what others miss are often misunderstood. Some are called sensitive. Some are called quiet. Some are called intense. Some are called overthinkers. But beneath all those labels is usually something much simpler. A person paying attention. A person whose mind naturally sees details, patterns, and signals that many others overlook. That doesn't make them superior. It doesn't make them broken. It simply makes them different. And in a world that often rewards noise, speed, and distraction, the ability to notice may be one of the rarest strengths left. So maybe the question isn't, why do I notice so much? Maybe the better question is, what should I do with what I notice? Because once you understand your awareness, it stops feeling like a burden and starts becoming a gift. So tell me, which type sounds most like you? The detail observer, the pattern detector, the room reader, the human lie detector, or the silent analyst? And what's something you've noticed that everyone else seemed to miss? Let me know in the comments.